Let's get into our first topic then. And was it right to deny Shamima Begum's UK citizenship? Get your calls in now. The former ISIS bride has lost a fresh bid to overturn a 2019 decision by the Home Office. Shamima was just 15 years old when she travelled to Syria to join ISIS in 2015, a decision that she says she regrets. But Dame Sue Carr, one of the judges who heard her latest legal battle at the Court of Appeal, said today that although Shamima may have been influenced and manipulated to leave the UK, she may have made a calculated decision to align with ISIS. Here is just a little bit more of the judgment.
It could be argued that the decision in Miss Begum's case was harsh. It could also be argued that Miss Begum is the author of her own misfortune. But it is not for this court to agree or disagree with either point of view.
However, Shamima's lawyer has said that she will not stop fighting. So do you think she should be allowed back? Kulveer, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on this?
It's a difficult one, but I do agree with the decision not to allow her to come back. I think it's hugely challenging that what the judge said in terms of it was a calculated decision by her, and even in the time that's elapsed, this has become more of an issue for us because it's an issue of national security, and I think that was stated in the judgment. If she is allowed back, for her, I think life will be difficult. She'd be a lightning rod for all kinds of things. But for the country and for the security services, she'd be a constant issue. And I think on those bases, for the safety of the country, national security, and I would say also for her life, I don't think that she should come back, and it's the right decision.
Imarn, what's your gut reaction to this?
Oh, I feel so sad for her, genuinely. Imagine being 15. Think about what it was like when you were 15. We just make stupid decisions, right?
Not that level of...
No, some people do, some people do. And the reason why is because we're really impressionable as young people, right? We get kind of swept up in what we think could be glamorous, what we think could be potentially better for our lives. And we do know she was groomed, right? She was manipulated by adults, and that led to her decision. She was even given instructions as to how to get to Syria by adults. So when we think about being swept up as a 15-year-old and being manipulated by an adult, and then having to stay in a tent for like 5 years, and then finding out that you lost your citizenship, and then finding out that you 3 children obviously dead. The people that you came there with, the 2 other girls, are also dead. And she basically has no future because she was 15 and was impressionable. So I feel quite bad for her. Irrespective of whether, I appreciate that many people think that she is a potential security risk, but in my head it's quite simple. She comes back to England, she goes to prison, and so she's locked in a cell, so I don't really see how there's much of a risk there. She's just in a cell. OK, well, I want to speak to a lawyer now, Harjat Bangal, to get a perspective on what actually happened today. So Harjat specialises in immigration and national law. Harjat, please, could you break down what this ruling means and what happened today and what could happen next?
Well, this was a technical hearing to see whether the previous decision made by the SIAC was correct or not. And in fact, the Court of Appeal has ruled on that point that actually that decision was correct, to deny Shamima essentially to come back to the UK and to rule as it did. It's not there to rule on points of morality or, or opinion. The Court of Appeal's job today was to see whether the previous decision was correct in law. And that's what it has decided, that there was no fault made. And as a result, Shamima remains excluded and her citizenship remains deprived.
But her lawyer says that this won't be the end of her fight. What would that mean in the future?
That means a potential appeal to the Supreme Court, which might take a year, and then the Supreme Court will hear this case again and decide whether this judgment is correct or not. But for that time, she would remain excluded from the UK and not allowed to come here. Essentially, it's another lengthy process. It's one thing to say we're not going to give up, but every case has to be decided when lawyers decide whether it's the chances of it succeeding or not on its merits. So, I mean, this is quite a landmark judgment and a big victory for the government today, because essentially what it's saying that the correct steps were taken by the Home Secretary at the time, Sajid Javid, in relation to deprive Shamima Begum. And the implications could be quite widespread for this.
And this is all to do with national security. Do you think she does pose a risk to national security?
I don't know whether now she's a risk to national security, but as one of your guests said earlier, she definitely will prove to be a massive distraction. And as the other guest said, she might just come here to spend a lifetime behind bars. So she probably might even be freer in a refugee camp than she would be here. She'd be more free there. So essentially, we're going to looking at what sort of life would she have. But I think that the key is, if we're looking at on a moral thing, on a moral compass, is she's born in the UK, she's bred in the UK. Is it the UK's responsibility to punish her and to deal with her case, rather than just say, actually, she's not our responsibility. She can rot wherever she wants. She made her own bed and she can lie in it. And I think that's the sort of moral question which everyone is sort of arguing over at the moment.
I think there's another argument to say that this ruling may put off other ISIS runaways from trying to return to the UK. Do you think that that's true? And also, how many of them do you think that there would be?
We don't really know how many there are, but where it acts as a deterrent, yeah, essentially, if someone's who's eligible for dual nationality is now thinking of going to go abroad and thinking they can come back here after joining terror groups, then they might think again if they're looking at her state that she's in. But equally, if someone's sole nationality is British and they're not eligible for anything else, then that won't put them off, because they'll always be a British citizen and Britain will always essentially have to accept them back. So it's almost creating a sort of two-tier system and two-tier sort of nationality, in effect, that if you're eligible for another nationality, then Britain can take your nationality away if you're going to get involved in this. And some people will probably say, well, rightly so. I mean, you know, if you don't want to do the time, then don't do the crime.
It's actually a really interesting point you bring up, and something I'm sure we'll debate in future. I'm just going to go to calls. Stay with us, Harjap. Gina from London, what's your thoughts on this ruling? Are you happy that she's not being allowed back yet?
No, from the beginning, I couldn't understand how someone who was born here, brought up here, a British citizen, and you can take that right away from them. If it was an adult and they went abroad and fight, I could, yes, maybe. But at 15, British, you know, I just don't understand it. And at what age, you know, if she was 12, what would it be the same outcome? You know, so when is a child a child? I don't understand it. So I'd like to know, you know, if she was 12, would it be the same outcome? If she was Caucasian, would it be the same outcome? So I just don't. I think at 15, you don't know what you're doing at 15.
Very interesting questions, Gina. And actually, Imarn said the exact same thing. You don't know what you're doing. But it is true. I mean, 12, only 3 years earlier, would it have been a different outcome, do you think?
There could have been a consideration there about the influence on, as Imarn was saying, the grooming, the manipulation, the level of that for a 12-year-old is significantly different for a 15-year-old.
But at what point does it change? At what point did we think Shamima should have made a different decision?
Well, I think the issue about taking the citizenship away is also about the safety and security of British citizens here. That's the relationship that I think the decision is being made in. It's highlighted in the decision that the key feature is national security. But
Harjap makes a fair point. That does create then a two-tier system, that if you're a criminal with a singular British passport, you're treated differently to if you commit a crime and you have the ability to gain access to 2 different passports if you have a dual nationality.
And just, may I add, and also it's different if your parents are foreign-born, because this is why she was able to be in this position, because her parents are foreign-born, Bangladeshi. So had they all been born here, maybe it would have been slightly different. So that's that.
But this two-tier system is going to cause some serious issues going forward, is it not?
It is, but we can only judge this particular case. And I think in this instance, you know, that's why if we change the age, we change the background of the individual, the nationality of parents, we could have different decisions. But I think this ruling, and that's why I'm supportive of it, yes, I think national security trumps all other concerns here.
What would you like to see happen then, Gina? I mean, we've just heard she potentially could have a more free life where she is in Syria. If she came over here, she would face a British court, presumably, and would spend the rest of her days in prison.
I think she should be allowed back. And I watched her reports, whether it's true or not. But I've heard her say that she knows what the outcome is. She just wants to come back where she belongs. And if it means going to prison and spending the rest. So she's already said that, that's what she wants. So I don't see, and personally, I don't think there is a threat, because at 15, and she's been through so much, that's a lesson learned, I think. And so she should be allowed back. I think what they're doing is kind of, there's a sense of race involved in it, and I think it's
also there's a sense.
Can I just say she'll always be British? They can't take that away from her. She was born here. She was brought up here. She'll always be British.
They have taken her passport away as it stands at the moment, though, Gina. I wonder whether you also think there's a sense that they're making an example of her in order to put other runaways off trying to get back into Britain. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yes, but if when she did it, she didn't know. She probably wasn't even thinking about coming back, because at that time, at that age, it would have been, I saw them on the clip, on the news clip, just going away. And it looked like it was fun. It was exciting in a child's mind, not knowing what the outcome would be. And she's older now. She's lost children. I think it's really cruel. It's very cruel.
Thank you very much.
I think she should be allowed back.
Thank you very much for your call. Welcome back. We are live on Channel 5 with Kulveer and Imarn. And I'm also now joined by filmmaker Andrew Drury. Now, later we're going to be asking if we should give more cash to Ukraine to help them keep fighting Russia. But now we want more of your calls on whether it's right to deny ISIS bride Shamima Begum UK citizenship. She just lost her latest appeal. So the number for your thoughts on this, 0207 862 2222. Get those calls in now. But we'll start with you, Andrew. First of all, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you have met Shamima on several occasions, but your opinion has changed throughout your relationship with her. What was your first impressions?
I first met her about 2 or 3 years ago inside the camp, and it was on a day off from filming a documentary. So it was just a chance meeting. And when I first saw her, she was like kind of this little weak girl. She looked actually in a really pretty bad state, and I thought she was mentally in a bad state. She was very teary, and I felt sorry for her.
I think we might actually have a clip from when you met Shamima on this occasion.
You get from 14 to getting on the aeroplane, and that, how? Is it just a bit bravado? Your mates are there going, so you go?
I mean, it's...
Or more than that? If the government come and spoke to you, would you be willing to tell them how it happened?
Of course, yeah. I actually think it's important that they know, so that they can prevent it in the future. The fight against terrorism is not a one-man job. It's multiple people with multiple skills that...
And do you believe that you have the tools?
I do, yeah.
To stop kids?
Yeah, I do.
So that was obviously from a later meeting with her, and she says there that she could help fight terrorism. How did your opinion change then? What happened?
Well, from the first person I met, as I say, she was very tearful, and at the end of that time I went to shake her hand and she gave me a hug, and she cried. And when I left, I never thought I'd ever see her again, but then was asked by broadcasters to go back. And then we had a kind of a telephone text relationship. And the second time I met her, she opened a purse up, and in the pictures of her purse was her children. One of them must have been about 8 months old, because I know a lot of people said that she didn't have any kids, but she did. And it was a picture of a child with chocolate around its face. And it made me sad, because I knew it died. I mean, I'm a father myself, and she was the age of my daughter. So when I said that, I sent a message to her when I got home. I said, I'm really, really sorry to see the picture of children. It really affected me and upset me. And she said to me at that point, don't worry, I'm over that part of my life. And that was a kind of a big indication. I know everybody will say this will be down to the trauma that she would have been affected by, but I didn't see any trauma. I know I'm not professional enough to say that, but I didn't see it. I saw no empathy all the time that I met her.
Do you think that she poses a security risk?
No. I think maybe what she stood for maybe did or does, but as herself, I don't think she is. She's not. I mean, ISIS don't want her anyway. So I mean, she stood against them. Some things she said she'd be at risk from them anyway. So no, I don't think there's any security risk with it. But what she stands for might.
The first interview that we've seen of Shamima, she didn't seem very remorseful about her part that she played in ISIS, and her defence for that later, I believe, was the fact that there was lots of ears listening, and there would have been some people reporting back to ISIS, and she was fearful of saying something wrong that ISIS would have found offensive.
That's not kind of factual from her, because she's at risk every day in that camp, because there's a tier within the women in that camp. So the ISIS will never go away, because even at the moment, girls in that camp are being married to high-ranking ISIS officials, even now. So there's a tier. So no, I mean, she's at risk anyway from ISIS. She's had 2 or 3 attempts to kill her in the camp, to burn her tent. So that when I went there a couple of years ago, 2 tents were burnt. So I don't agree with that. No, I think she's always at risk.
Interesting. OK, stay with us. We're going to go to calls now. Lynn from Glasgow, how do you feel about this ruling?
I think it's the right ruling, and there's so many points here. First of all, she was 15. You know right from wrong at 15. Then it was added in that she was groomed. Well, it came out at first that she was actually looking on the web for ISIS and all the things that she was looking into, not being groomed. She was actually looking into them on her own. And then the fact that she feels sorry for herself now, and we all feel sorry for her. She didn't feel sorry when she was sewing a suicide vest onto somebody. She didn't feel sorry when she was seeing children beheaded and it meant nothing to her.
All of these things have been disputed. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to say that all of those things, sorry, I do apologise. I had to just throw that in there. Apologies for interrupting. But the whole suicide vest that has been disputed, she actually claims that she never did it. In terms of weapons, she claims that she never saw it. In terms of beheading, and she did see a lot of things, just like babies and people being killed. But I think we just need to also remember, I wanted to touch on that point.
She said to you that she hadn't done any of those things.
Yeah. I spent, she lived in Baghouz and in Raqqa, and I spent time there. I've asked those questions. She lived in a flat with the main armourer for ISIS, so she does have a tendency of telling lies quite often. I've caught her out on several times of telling lies, because she's fighting for her safety. She's fighting to get home. So you can't rely on those things she said. There is proof, and there is eyewitnesses. She was part of the morality police, the Hizbah, and if she was, she would have committed some heinous crimes as just being part of them. And there is proof that she was part of the Hizbah. OK,
so, but even without knowing the details of what part she played in ISIS, we do know that she was an ISIS bride, and that she did see things like heads in bins. And you think for that reason, Lynn, we should strip her of her passport and just wave goodbye to her?
Yeah, she knew. Just even get interrupted there. The whole thing is now, I mean, it's been discussed before the break, it's because of the colour of skin. This is really riles people, because it's not because of what colour. I don't care if she's black, white or polka dot. At the end of the day, she knew what she was getting into. It was something she looked into. It was an ideology that she wanted to be involved in. And then you're turning around and saying, oh, but your ideology wasn't what you thought it was, all of that. There's got to be consequences to things.
Sorry, Imarn,
you can't.
Sorry to interrupt, Lynn. Sorry, I've done it twice. I do apologise.
No, you're interrupting all the time, and it's
it was twice. But...
You're turning it round all the time to be a race thing, which you've done before.
No, Lynn. Actually, Imarn didn't do that. I'm just going to let you in and
she
make the point. Hold on, Lynn.
Lynn.
That was in response to someone else who had brought it up. So it was a caller that spoke about. I can't remember her name, but it was the first caller that actually spoke about race, and I was actually adding to the argument.
Moving on from that, what did you want to say to Lynn?
I just think we need to have more empathy. So irrespective of whether you think it's about race or not, we do need to have more empathy in this particular situation. And I just wanted to add that she actually said that camp was worse than prison. It's like being in prison. And that was something that she said in the podcast. So we know that whatever she's going through now, she's already had to be in that camp for a very long time. So she's had to kind of pay the price of what she's done. She's had to deal with the punishment, and now it's kind of going to be indefinite. So it's just this never-ending torture of someone who made a mistake at 15. And I just wanted to add one more thing. As much as she may have looked on the internet for bits of information, she was still groomed afterwards. She was still told what to do afterwards. She was still instructed as to how to do it, where to do it, and where to go. So irrespective of whether she used her initiative first, she was still groomed.
OK, Lynn, even if we said that she did all these heinous things and all the things that are assumed of her are absolutely true, she is a dangerous woman, isn't it better to have her in this country and under our watchful eye than off somewhere where we don't have as close scrutiny over what she's doing? Oh, we've lost Lynn. Lynn, thank you very much for your call. John from Northumberland, what's your thoughts on this?
Good morning, Storm. Good morning, panel. My thoughts are something you briefly mentioned. She has shown, the lady on the panel talks about empathy. She has shown no empathy whatsoever. I've seen several interviews with the girl. I do believe she's had a horrific life. I mean, it must be unpleasant losing children and all sorts. But the thing is, the interviews I've seen, there was one about, whether she saw acts of, like beheading and things there. She showed no remorse whatsoever. You've mentioned that, Storm. Empathy and remorse, she has shown none of it. And although I feel sorry for her, and she's a young lady, I still don't think she should be allowed back. It's a remorse and empathy sort of thing. The lady on your panel doesn't seem to get that.
Well, no, I'm just going to put that to... Well, the empathy was on our part, not hers, but I'm just going to put that to Andrew. You've met. Shamima, do you think that she shows empathy and remorse?
Not at all. In no way at all. I think I would question her mental stability anyway. So I'm not professional, but all the time, and what she's seen... I mean, she's seen war. She's escaped war. She's escaped anything, but saw no feelings, no nothing. There was even she would throw tantrums, so I saw that change in her mood, but no empathy.
Surely that comes with the territory,
no?
No?
Could that not be the sign of trauma, Kulveer?
It can be. We're hypothesising on her mental state, and I think it's a very complex area for us to discuss because Andrew's seen her firsthand, and even he can't say, the stability of the individual. But it comes back to, and Andrew said this, you asked Andrew, would she be a threat to national security? And you said no. But what she stands for would be. And I think you said that as well. Yeah. The ideology. So having her back in this country... But she's saying that she doesn't stand for that anymore. Well, that's what she could say a lot, as we've discussed, her ability to say many things. But that would still be a lightning rod to other people. And it would affect the national security of everyone else in this country. And for that reason, she's being denied access back to the country.
But, John, what about the question that I asked Lynn earlier, that, even if she was the worst person in the world and still was and had no remorse, wouldn't she be better in this country under our watchful eye?
I don't think so, because I think she would be more in danger in this country at the moment. I would send her to a neutral place, perhaps, where she wouldn't be in so much danger. But to come back here, I think there would be a lot of threats against her, and I think she might even be in more danger here.
Interesting, John. Thank you very much for your call. Amanda from Lancashire, what's your views on this?
I don't think it's completely right to deny the UK citizenship, purely because at 15, I do believe she was groomed and radicalised, and people accept that of the young ladies in Rochdale that were groomed into that sex ring and everything, which is wrong, and that cults radicalise and groom people. So I think she does need de-radicalising, and I don't think if she's not safe where she is, like the other gentleman said, she may not be safe here. We need to find her somewhere. She needs some kind of help. And as far as empathy goes, I'm pretty sure if she's radicalised into something with ISIS, she'll have been taught not to show.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to say.
You were shaking your head there, Andrew.
Well, I think some facts are missed. She doesn't have the option to choose, or we don't have the option to choose where she goes. She could stand trial in Syria. That's likely what to happen. So this citizenship is not massive to her anyway, because although it is because it gives her grants her to appeal to come back, because she's likely to stand trial there because that's where her crimes are committed, and she could be sentenced to 20 years anyway there. So I think if she was given a citizenship back, we probably would have forced her to go to trial anyway.
Yeah, so with that in mind then, so she's in a camp at the moment where there's a threat to her life. She's likely to stand trial in Syria, where she would face prison there. So actually it would very much benefit her to come home and face a British court. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
and there's other things happening there, because the SDF, which is Syrian forces, have said on numerous occasions they're going to let all the prisoners go if the coalition pull out. So Shamima could, at some stage, be just released, and no one will know where she is. So I think for protection against our own country, it would be better in a way that we had her in prison here, because we'd have control of her.
You can monitor her behaviour.
But undoubtedly, her as a character and how she is, I mean, I've met many people in my time, but I've never met anybody as manipulative as her.
Interesting. Amanda, thank you for your call. Nadine from London, what's your thoughts on the ruling today? She lost her appeal to come back.
I think it's almost laziness on our part by refusing her. It's that kind of, we're going to wash our hands of her and we're going to pretend that this problem doesn't exist. And I would be much more comfortable if she was here being studied by psychiatrists, psychologists, trying to find out how they got into her head, what it was that made her turn towards such an ideology, so that, you know, we have the information and tools to stop it happening again. Because I think it's much more important that we focus on the fact that this isn't going to stop. There will always be groups that are targeting vulnerable young, women and men. And we need to have the tools to try and fight it. I think she could be a valuable asset in learning how those groups work.
It's a really interesting point that you make, but from what Andrew said, do you think that we would be able to gain information from her? I mean, she sounds like, from your perspective, a fairly wily character.
Well, firstly, the information you had is dated now, so things move on. And you couldn't trust a word anyway, because it changes. These words that she's saying are obviously, she's fighting for survival. So I don't think you can trust what she says. And modern technology has changed since she was there. I mean, she was 5-6 years ago, and the people that she would have been involved in, they would have already debriefed her on that anyway. And we mentioned de-radicalisation. She's had none, but so she says she's self-de-radicalised, and which is impossible.
OK. And Nadine, thank you very much for your call. Elva from Cornwall, what's your thoughts?
To my mind, she was a child. She was 15 years old. When does childhood end? She wasn't 16, she wasn't 18. She was a groomed child. So therefore, she should be allowed back.
OK, well, I'll put that to...
As simply as that.
I've got you, Elva. I'll put that to Kulveer. I mean, it's the same question time and time again. We are, you know, we are punishing a woman for a decision that she made as a child.
Yes, but as the judge said, a calculated decision and informed...
Can you make a calculated decision at 15?
I think you can. I think you can. I know we have this, you know, flip over into 16 and you're a sort of adult.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing, as we all know. But she was aware. Yes, there is potential grooming and information, but she was also looking at this. I think the issue here is also the safety of her coming back, but she has potentially the option to go to Bangladesh. Yeah, and I step back.
Is that an option?
No.
Really?
I think it was turned down. I'm pretty sure that she... In fact, no, Bangladesh said they wouldn't take her.
Yeah.
Can I answer that
She's
question?
not
What
allowed in the
happened in
country.
Bangladesh?
Andrew.
I asked her, because I raised her that question to her. I asked her, I said, you have the option to go to Bangladesh. She said, if I go to Bangladesh, they'll execute me immediately because they have the death penalty. And for the crime I've committed, it's not an option.
Right.
They
But
won't
she,
let her back anyway.
she does have Bangladeshi nationality.
She does have dual nationality for a birth.
And I would just say, Andrew, on the basis of everything you've said, that whether you can trust what her view is, that's her view of what she thinks would happen in Bangladesh. And I don't think, you know, we've got to...
Well, her preference is certainly to come back to the UK.
Oh, yes, and we can understand why, because, you know, it would be a much different environment here, a much... she would probably think that it would be an easier environment here than any other environment. But it wouldn't be safer for the rest of us. And I think the government has to put national security ahead of everything else.
But why wouldn't she be safe?
for your
Sorry,
call.
why wouldn't she be safe if she's in prison? I don't understand.
Do I have time just to squeeze another quick call in? Ethan, what's your thoughts on this?
Hiya. I think she signed herself off as soon as she left the UK. For me, what kind of put the final nail? 15. When people use the excuse of her being 15, I think it's ridiculous. But the worst thing I would have seen myself doing at 15 was possibly, because I don't know, stealing a meal deal from Tesco. Like, genuinely.
But Ethan,
ludicrous.
but there's potential grooming involved here.
I understand the grooming side of things. Even so, she she left with 2 other of her friends, and she was the only one, I believe, to get on the plane. They knew what they were doing was wrong.
Okay.
And she was the only one who could identify that. And when she said the Manchester bombing was justified, that was the final nail in the coffin for me.
But she didn't say that?
She did.
Oh, she did say that?
She said she legitimised it for...
Did she not take that back at a later interview?
Once you say it, can't take it back.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's interesting in itself. Ethan, thank you very much for your call. A huge thank you to Andrew Drury for joining us and giving us a little bit more insight into that. We are going to have to move on now. After the break, we're asking if the UK should give more cash to Ukraine to help them fight Russia. Tomorrow marks 2 years since the war started, but Ukrainian soldiers say that they're struggling to keep up the fight. 0207 862 2222 is the number. We'll see you after this.